Welcome, everybody. Academy session number 3, One Stop Ready program, year number 2. So welcome to all of our communities. Once again, the attendance inspires us. So on behalf of the staff, particularly Ryan, who's chasing around back there, he's very grateful that you all came because he gets nervous. He's like, oh, geez, people are going to show up. So we're very grateful that you're here. We'll do a little more learning tonight. The good news is Tigers won. If you DVR'd it, sorry, Tigers won. But that's done, and it's only going to get colder outside tonight, so ignore the fact it's 72 and sunny in late September in Michigan, and you're here instead. So our gratitude to all of you. So tonight, implementation, if I could say it, best practices. So as we always do, we're going to do a quick refresh of what we've talked about at our previous 2 sessions, some of the things that we've talked about. I may pick on you. I may pick on some of my friends that were in last year's program or this year's program. If I do, then be bold, all right? Be courageous, because everybody that doesn't get picked on is like, oh, good, he didn't pick on me. So be courageous. Tonight, best practices. Note in the top corner, the last Academy class, October 29th. This could be the most significant class that we do, management structure. So for your colleagues that have been in and out of the program, and you see them, remind them, hey, Gib said that maybe the most important one is management structure. The reason the one coming up in October is so important is because we talk about best practices and having that top to bottom mentality. So that the top of the food chain in your organization and the bottom of your food chain can flip around anytime they want, and you can have the bottom be on the top and the top and the bottom, and they're all in the same direction. Everybody is marching to the same vision, to the same purpose. And so October 29th, don't forget that one. So recap tonight's topics. We have old communities, new communities. You all know who you are. Remember, we talked about what we're trying to solve here, which is an ongoing, long-term problem. It doesn't apply just to this time period. I spoke at an Optimist group this morning, and a bunch of good folks, and I said, you know, in 2009, we lost, 9 and 10, we lost 36% of what we're worth as a county. Remember when we went through those numbers? $62 billion of value as a county just in 2 years, and we're trying to fill that big hole. This was the jobs numbers, and look how good we're doing, and it's moving back. But has anybody, who's seen the job reports lately? Does anybody follow that? Oh, yeah. Well, of course you do. You do it for us. Who from the community ever watches the job reports? Other than ABC, Good Morning America. So what's happening right now in the job context out there?
For the most part, depending on area, it's kind of slowed down again.
Everything's slowed down a little bit. Starting to get a little stagnant. Have you noticed that the jobless claims are going in a bad direction, and the number of employed is going in a bad direction right now? And so when we talk about jobs, we can't ever say that, oh, geez, look at this, we're filling the hole, how great. Things are good again, because things are always in a state of flux and improvement. We talked about building on your assets. Remember, we had that great presentation from Hamilton Anderson that talked about, you know, do you know your assets? Do you know where things are? Do you know your geography, economic context, the things that you have? The types of tools that you can have. Remember we talked about, or she talked about, collaboration, immediate action, short-term interventions towards long-term change, educating initiatives, pilot projects, those types of things. I thought that she really had a lot of good suggested ideas for the communities. Now, if I picked on a community and said, did somebody go back and adopt anything that she said, what kind of response do you think I would get? Dick, what kind of response do you think I would get if I asked that question? Everybody did everything that she said. Oh, it's good. Remember, the program's not about you doing any one particular thing, but to getting around the idea that if we start thinking in these directions, that we will inherently do these types of things. And so she gave you some great ideas, policy, allowable uses, signage ordinances, those types of things. And remember we talked about at one point, yeah, the things are looking up, right? Permits are looking up. I was talking to Tim McNutt, Tim's here somewhere. He's in the back over there saying they got a nice, him and Dave got a nice little bicker out there about who has more new housing permits right now between Independence and Orion. That's a nice bicker to have, right? Orion, Chris, how many Orion new houses they got this year? Over 200 new houses in Orion Township. Yeah, so it's good. Yeah, number 2 in the country, so it's good. Just a little bit above Independence. Good thing Kittle's on a cruise. You guys will be stepping outside probably, right? So yeah, so things are looking better. In communities, who's a planning commissioner here? Raise your hand if you're a planning commissioner. All right. Keep your hand up if you periodically track how many new permits were issued in any given week in your community. Well, do you think it's important to know that?
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's probably important to know it. Now, is it a bad thing that you don't know? Not really. But it is something to get you thinking of a mindset of what's more important. Remember, I always use the example of, am I here to save Old Man Johnson's fence, or am I here to know what the economic vision and context of my community is? And you're probably there to learn about you're there to more purposefully have the economic context. Where are your permits going? What's the direction? Remember, we talked about things are changing. So in your vision of your context, things are changing. You're not going to get the same businesses that you used to get. All right? So I know in Troy, they used to have an old, what's that, a Kmart or a Kroger? Where the new theater went by.
Kmart.
It was a Kmart. It was a Kmart. Yeah, so the old Kmart, dilapidated thing. Now it's a cool theater. You might say, well, Matt, that's just one use for another in that market. That's not always necessarily so. Remember, we talked about this, about how things are changing. Back in 10, the blue box of commercial was much bigger than the blue box of commercial is today. The industrial boxes, how everything is in flux. So, Don and Royal Oak, do you guys analyze what types of businesses are coming in and out of your community? All right, Don, he's a good city manager, but he doesn't have time for that, right? Right? He really doesn't. But as a planning commissioner, as a zoning board member, you need to be thinking that way. Not just about, I'm at the meeting because we've got an application. You need to be thinking of, oh, this is a cool IT business. I wonder how that fits within the direction that the type of business economy is going in our community. So we talked about having an understanding of those numbers, not always. Now remember, this is an important one. So who thinks they can point out where your role is on this slide, if you remember? Does anybody want to come up and do it? Does anybody remember? Mark remembers. You remember. Don't you remember? This is my favorite slide. And I didn't even create this. This was created by Expansion Solutions Magazine, which is a site consultant's periodical that comes out there. Remember, we told you that this little box that's hidden behind all of this other stuff, that's your box. Who remembers why we pointed that out? No, nobody's bold tonight. Neil, nobody's bold tonight. Okay, I'll remind you why we pointed it out. Remember, we talked about, by the time a project gets to you, what goes into the project? That all of these other boxes sometimes takes 2 years, and then finally they're to you. And so if your role is to say, man, you know what, I don't like the brick color on that plan, so I want to table this for 60 days so I can make sure that I can see the right brick color on the plan. You have to put it in the context that the person that wants to write the multi-million-dollar check in your community has already done all of these other much larger boxes. And then your box rolls around and you're in that role of well, now I'm in the entitlement government side. So this is One Stop Ready, right? It's not to get you to not ask about the brick color. Ask about the brick color. It's important. But it's to get you to understand the context of all this other stuff is going on. So remember, we talked about all of that. To have you thinking about when projects are in your community. We had panel discussions about this. You guys remember Matt Farrell and Steve Bach? So Matt's with Core Partners, Steve's with Valmir. Who remembers what Valmir is, their number one thing they build? CBS, yeah, see, you guys were listening. See, maybe if we had wine and beer, we'd get more out. I don't know.
The other day I went.
Very good. So they talked about it. Remember how reluctant they were to actually really talk to all of you at first? And then as more people kind of got talking, a little bit more came out at the end. And at the end of it, they were even saying, wow, we could learn a lot from our community members. And the community members were saying, maybe if we just talked more, we could figure out our problems. So who remembers what Steve Bach said was the number one concern that always happens to developers? Who remembers what he said? Do you remember what he said? Who remembers?
Maybe it wasn't it something to do with someone letting the general public know some inside information ahead about the development coming and then it's spoiling it for the rest?
Well, he did say that. He said that if you learn of a really cool development that's coming and then you tell all your neighbors, it often makes it really difficult for the developer then to actually do the development. He did say that. But from a planning process, from a process, part of it was how soon. It had to do with reviews. It had to do with reviews. Mark, so it had to do with reviews. Steve Bach said, you know, the one thing that really, really hurts us more than anything is we submit and we get a review, a planner's and engineer review. And then we think we fix everything, and then we submit it again, and then we get a new review. And he said, it's fine if I miss something, but it's when they bring up new things that they didn't tell me about that should have been part of the first review, that's where it all bogs down. Because now we go back to the other box. Remember this box? this box. So we talked about all of those things from the developer's perspective, and they had a good discussion. Remember, we had some of the questions that we had them answer. We won't go through them all. But I like this one. How much does a welcoming attitude affect your decision making? That was a question to them, remember? Who remembers? Do you remember what they said? They said it makes all the difference in the world. We don't want to go to communities that are mean and grumpy. But if they welcome us in the door and they sit down with us and they work with us, we'll take extra time and spend extra money. Both Matt and Steve confirmed that. So it's a great question. Is your attitude a reflection of who you are? So who remembers what the program is kind of designed around, the tenets that it's designed around? First one is what? First one is what? Self-evaluation, right? You have to think about who you are, what we do right, what we do wrong. Be able to self-evaluate a little bit. What's good? What are we doing good? What are we doing bad? Right? That's the most important thing. So it came out of the context of all of that. All right, so tonight we're going to talk about implementation of best practices. Now, as you heard before, we have kind of refined down to what we know are, in concept, best practices. We know that if you have pre-application meetings, that's a best practice. Now, how you do those is what you're going to hear a little bit about tonight and from some other communities. We know that having everything online, having it really online, meaning very easy to get to, very easy to find on your website, is a best practice. We know that. So you don't have to have the same website as Bloomfield or some of the others that have used the clear zoning group or anything like that, but something online would be good. Proactive project tracking. So I was in a community the other day, Rachel Lockwood and I were out there, and a project has been in the works for about 20 months now. And it has broken down because of this. At least I think so. Because of this, project tracking. As the mayor told me, Matt, there's two sides to every story. So if you look at it from the project tracking from the municipal side, they say, we've highlighted in red when they've blown deadlines. And when you look at it from the developer side, they don't have it highlighted anything, they just have it like this to say, we didn't know there was a deadline. So the project tracking, having some type of proactive project tracking, we know is the best practices. Communities that do it, that they call and say you're about to miss something, hey, can we come out and sit down with you and make sure it doesn't happen? Those are the communities that across the country are really doing great things. Business and community input, clear and efficient permitting processes. So these basic 5 things can be turned into 20 different best practices, but they're just the basic core of it. So to get the context going of tonight, I've showed all of you this before. Let me pull this top stuff off. Please fold it over. I would encourage you, and our staff can get you a link to it if you want. National League of Cities and the International Economic Development Council. All you have to do is do a Google search for National League of Cities, role of elected officials in economic development. Or send Brad or Ryan or somebody an email, we'll get you the link to it. My staff has seen this for a couple of years now. This is what really triggered the thought process in my head to say, geez, we should really have a better understanding of what our role is as an economic developer in our community. And so it has 10 things that you should know. And it's a really nice workbook, and it's pretty cool. But I want to read you one of the quotes. It says, in the first one, your community's place in the broader economy. Too many local governments still act as if they have the luxury of merely competing with each other for a tax base, especially within their region. But economically, this is a sideshow or a delusion. The real economic competition is global, and competing effectively requires regional collaboration. So we've heard regional collaboration in Southeast Michigan since, I think, dirt was created. So we think we know it. So who thinks they know what regional collaboration is? Stephanie, what's regional collaboration to you?
I guess generally speaking, it's several groups of people, communities working together to achieve a common goal.
So groups of people and communities working together. Donnie, what do you think? What's regional collaboration?
Sounds great.
Sounds good to you, Donnie? Donnie's like, it's 70 and sunny out, Matt. Shut up and let's get out of here. Chris, what do you think? Working with Stephanie is regional collaboration? Yeah.
Because we're not really competing against Auburn Hills, we're competing together.
So a form of regional collaboration would be knowing what's going on, supporting it where it is, recognizing their achievements.
And I would say
Going forward?
leveraging our strengths.
Leveraging strength.
Some communities are stronger in some areas and others aren't.
Good.
Chris just wants the people that are buying a house.
Yeah.
Well,
Look, Ron, we have jobs too, okay?
The former city manager, now the new city manager in Novi, Pete Auger, when I was in Chris's position, said, "Matt, you got a great little community. You're the bedroom community for the engine of Auburn Hills." I'm like, "Well, that's nice of you to say." Or get a thought. Regional collaboration.
Regional prosperity councils? I'm just messing with you.
Yeah, that's a whole other political topic. So what do you think regional collaboration is? Kind of a collaborative nature of things, right? Tony, you're agreeing? All right, so name me one example where you would see that happen. Like one thing, one practice, one...
With Waterford
Yeah.
and Pontiac?
Yeah.
Nothing.
That's not true. That's not true. You guys share fire trucks and stuff.
That's a big
Yeah,
collaboration.
it's in a different context. It's a different context, I know. So tonight is about implementation of best practice, but it's also starting to get you thinking about the purpose of the One Stop Ready program. So if you've been involved with it for a while, and if you've come to these sessions, you've heard me say over and over again that this isn't about what Oakland County thinks you should do. This is about us saying, we think that this community does something really, really well, and you should listen to it, and you should try to adopt it yourself. So if you hear something that say, wow, they do that really well, that's cool, why don't we try to do that? And then you call them and say, hey, can we spend some time with you so we can figure out why your pre-app meetings are so wonderfully awesome to the development community? And then you're working together, and then you're adopting that practice going forward. That's regional collaboration. It is what Stephanie said, groups of people that want to work together. Too often in the Detroit region, we talk about, hey, we all need to get together and sing Kumbaya, and then we never do it. This program is not designed to have you sing anything. This program is designed to have you all getting on a common platform. There's a reason that that quote in the National League of Cities thing is right, is this is a global marketplace now. We're completing, I don't care if it's a Taco Bell or Autoliv, it's a global marketplace. And we need to be thinking how we can collaborate regionally. So One Stop Ready program, and for tonight's work, is to think about why is this important to you and why is it important to the county? It's important to the county that we have these base practices because this will be an indication to anybody that comes here and wants to grow here that this region called Oakland County and all of its 61 communities, now there's 14 of you in the program now, we already have 8 or 9 that are begging to be in next year. So next year will be over 20 of you, all of you wonderful people, that want to have these best practices and be sharing these ideas and have the branding effect of it all. If we can pull this off, and we can say to the outside world, and we can say to the state, and to DC, and to Tokyo, that if you come to Oakland County from an economic development perspective, our community leaders know their role. They have a good context. Every once in a while, they ask how many permits are getting issued so they can keep up with what the community's doing and where trends are going. They get a context of where the job market is. They get a context of the kinds of industries that are there. But most significantly, when they come to work with all of you, whether you're an inspector, like Tim McNaught in the back, or whether you're a planning commissioner, like a trustee like Neil Porter, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter who you are, because they will say everybody has this basic sense of, we've got a base premise of we're one-stop ready and we do certain things better than everybody else. So we took something from Auburn Hills took something from us, and so on and so forth. So, when we started the program, we had 2013 communities. Am I supposed to go to the next slide, Ray?
Yeah.
All right, so one of the things that came up to say, well, you know, every program needs to get like recognition when you do something good, otherwise it's like, oh geez, well, we listen to you 4 times a year and it's boring after a while. So we said, well, the communities need to give themselves an award periodically to say, this is what we're doing best. This is our best practice. This is what we think we've done the very best over the last year in the context of what we're talking about being ready, about knowing who we are, about when people walk in the door, the opportunity doesn't slip through the cracks, those types of things, having that sense of readiness. And so here's what we've done in the past year as a one-stop ready community to do that. And so tonight, to get all of you thinking about, well, what does it mean to have a best practice? Well, I don't even know what he's talking about. The Tigers won. What's he talking about? It's not about me. It's about what the communities believe is the very best practice that they can have in their roles as economic developers. And so we're going to start tonight by asking each of last year's communities who are here to tell us very briefly about what they believe is the #1 thing that they've implemented as part of the One Stop Ready program in this context. So are we going to start with Auburn Hills alphabetically? And I'm assuming, Stephanie, that's why you're here, right? The wonderful, charming Stephanie Carroll. Oh, no.
No?
You're right on top of it.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephanie Carroll. I'm the manager of business development for the city of Auburn Hills, and I'm pleased to be here this evening to share with you what I believe that we took from being in the program and implemented over the past year. We looked at how we were doing economic development, and we focused on our strengths and identified some of the weaknesses. And we implemented something we like to call radical hospitality. I don't know, for those of you who know Steve Cohen and some of our planning commission members, they like to talk about the outstanding customer service that we provide. From when someone walks into the counter, from when we have our pre-application meetings, we get the team together and we really sit down with the developer, the architects, the planners to talk about their timing, what it is that they want. And so we listen to them, we try to meet their needs, we try to stay on their schedule, and we've been able to do that because I think a lot of the pre-planning meetings, and we now have involved some of the staff of Oakland County. I know Brett Hansen has been at some of our pre-development meetings. And so the input, it's been very valuable to us. That way, I was just talking to the ladies from Pontiac, so that when a site plan gets to our city council, it has been completely vetted. There are no last minute, you can't do this, or we're going to need to see that. It doesn't exist. By the time it reaches the city council, every T has been crossed and every I has been dotted. And so I think that speaks to the staff. And they do. They take the time, they will sit down with a 198 applicant and help them fill out every single page of that tax abatement application if that's what they need. Some companies have consultants, but we offer it as an additional service for anyone that needs the assistance. So I think we've done a good job at that. We keep looking at ways we can improve that, but I think our staff has really done a fantastic job. And then the other thing that we've really focused on, we're looking at some changes in the way we do economic development, and we're really working in partnership with our chamber. Not everybody's chamber is entirely business focused, but our chamber our missions are very much shared. I mean, they're a business advocate, and so we've started bringing them to a lot of our retention meetings and some of our attraction meetings, because they hear things that we don't hear. Sometimes people don't like to talk to the government. And so
some of the things that we're really proud about is we have a pretty efficient pre-application meeting. What we do is we pull in the supervisor, we pull in the engineer, our planner, also our zoning ordinance person, anybody who we feel is important that needs to be there. And we are very thorough in working with our clients, answering any questions that they have, addressing any issues that they might have with engineering, everything we can do up front to try to help them make this process very effective. We also have all of our paperwork available. So if someone says, oh, I think I'm going to need to have that permit, or I think I need to have a special use, we just provide that paperwork for them right away in that meeting. Another thing that we're doing that's pretty exciting is we're looking at expanding our township hall. And our township supervisor, he has a great vision for that, and he'd like to incorporate all of the department heads in that decision-making process, but it's basically not so much for what our needs are, but for our clients' needs. So we want to make it available so that someone walks into the township hall and they can go directly to whomever they need to speak to and just make it a very efficient process. So we're actually speaking with architects and planning that, and that's very important. We're also very blessed to have a lot of folks in our staff who have many years of experience, and that helps out tremendously as well. And we have full support. We don't have a very big staff. We have like 16 folks working for the township. But from every staff member, every elected official, we're all on board with One Stop Ready. In fact, I actually had someone call me today, a commercial developer, who said, I heard you guys are One Stop Ready, and he wanted to have us prove that to him. So we stepped up to the plate and provided him with all the information we could. So, so we're very excited. I mean, I'm new to this, but just from what I've seen, all the folks in Lyon Township are very much on board, and I think that makes all the difference.
And if anybody has questions for anybody that's doing a brief presentation, then throw your hand in the air. You know, be interactive, be bold a little bit. So I have a question. So in this year's communities, Don, I'll pick on you. So in Royal Oak, when you have a new person come in, who sits down at the table with them to talk about their project?
We actually have it scheduled right now.
Okay.
We've got the planner, we've got the development director,
So planner, engineer, building official, city manager. So if you had to, could you bring in the fire marshal? If there was a reason to bring in the fire marshal? Those types of people. Now, is this a new practice for you, or is this something that's always happened? No.
We've kind of offered it for a long time.
I'll be honest with you, as an outsider, it's the first I've heard that you put planning and engineering in the same. But that's just the feedback that I get. So this is good. It's exciting. So this is something new for you. So you can probably use some insight and some support from your colleague communities to say, hey, when I hit this roadblock, where does it come from, right? How do you get through it? That's good. Who else has a pre-op? Chris, do you guys do pre-ops in Oregon?
We do, yeah, we're booked.
Now remember, I've told the story before how I almost fired Jeff Key when he was still fire marshal, because he would refuse to participate. But how do you guys run your pre-op?
We do them, someone previous to me, to be unnamed, negotiated a good deal with our planner and our engineer. So it's our planner, our engineers, our fire chief, or fire marshal, whoever is available, planning and zoning administrator Tammy, who's back there, our building official Randy, who's back there, myself, and typically a representative or a planning commission. So our little mantra is, we tell them when they come in, is we're going to get you to a quick answer. And the answer might be no, but we're going to do it in a couple of meetings, not 6 planning commission meetings where you're drawing over.
So everybody has a little bit different version of it. Don has in-house staff. There's the reason I picked on him, because Royal Oak has in-house staff. Chris has consultant staff. Now the deal he's talking about is one that I believe is important, and Dick doesn't like to hear this because it was his firm that I made do it, is pre-ops, I believe, should be free to everybody, including the municipality, because the consultant, if you're doing your job right as an economic developer, will make more on the back end. And that's what happened when we switched and flipped the switch in Oregon. We didn't intend for it to be forever, but it's a model that works. And so whatever it is, the idea is that where the best practice work, which definitely is get everybody to the table that needs to be at the table, and then force them to be collaborative. Oxford's next, but nobody from Oxford Township could make it, and Joe's here. Joe, you want to share? Because I know you're being collaborative with everybody. So Joe Young, the village manager of Oxford.
Thank you very much for being here. And one single thing I'd like to share with you that's helped Oxford is when I came there 10 years ago, the manager was on the planning commission. And after I was there for a few months, they said, "You're too business friendly. We want you off the planning commission." So the good news is, during that 10 years, the One Stop Ready program has come into play. And we've turned the corner in the eyes and minds of our elected officials and our planning commissioners as to what we're supposed to be about, and that's bringing in development and business and growth into our community. So that mindset was the biggest single thing. We still got issues to deal with on the permitting end with our inspectors, who are not what I consider to be our ambassadors of great goodwill of bringing people in, because we're a small community. Although we have 12 restaurants in our downtown 2 blocks. If you haven't been there lately, be sure to come check us out. But we have small independent businesses and people that come in, and this one, for example, opened up a art gallery studio, rent a space. She saw this historic building, used to be a grain elevator, 5,000 square feet. She wanted to renovate it and made an art studio and a dance studio, and residence. And at the time, she didn't know what she's getting into, and she didn't necessarily hire, she didn't have the money to hire a professional to help her, but we need to help them and guide them, because she didn't know what kind of tenant she might end up with. Because things change. This is what we like to do. Well, she was very successful. She got a coffee shop in there, she got a consulting, she got a furniture consignment, and all those different uses impact the building code, particularly in fire issues, for example. And so we need our building officials to make them more aware and give them heads up, especially the one-time, small-time business people, because that's what a lot of, or most of our businesses come from. And then we've got people now wanting to expand into second stores. And not only in our community, but other communities, which this whole collaboration we hope to see is we'd like to get a Rudy's Market in Clarkson, and Clarkson would like to get a Boulevard Boutique from Oxford over there. So we would like to see expansion take place, and that's all working together. But to me, that's the biggest thing. I mean, there are other things we will continue to do with the internet and whatnot, but those are the biggest things, is the mindset, and as I said, radical. That's a word. I wouldn't use that in Oxford, but I understand what you mean.
That's good. Thanks, Joe. So see, it's not that scary to try new things, right? You know, Joe got kicked off the planning commission. He didn't run that. I mean, it was good. Yeah, question.
I just
Yeah.
wanted to ask a question of him. Did they think you were too business friendly because you wanted to change the ordinance and process, or because you were cutting corners?
I'll give this back to you.
No, when I got there, when you went before the planning commission, it was like you were going before a court. You're going to a firing court, because they were being very negative. I mean, they were upsetting the developers to the point that they said, I'll leave. I'm not going to invest my money here. So they weren't friendly and welcoming like you should be, because these people are investing money in your community, which is going to generate revenue. It's going to keep your services or improve your services, people. They're not doing you a favor by putting up a building and a business here. So we had that big mindset, and they were picking on things and dragging things out. But we've changed tremendously, where now we had a planned unit development approved in 2 months. We have conditional zoning approved already. And we do things in one meeting mostly, if not two at the very most. So we've really come along.
I don't know if you heard it, but I heard it, that even though Joe is excited about that they're doing things in one meeting and they're really working on their mindset, but did you hear him also say, we still have work to do? We need to work with our inspectors, we need to work with some of our staff. So when I highlighted the October meeting that talks about management structure, Tony sat through this last year. We really hammer that to say, you know, the excitement of the village manager meeting out front of people to attract them to the community can't be diminished because someone on your inspection team's having a bad day. So you have to have that mentality, and vice versa, to be honest with you. Your inspector being a champion of your community can't be frustrated because, well, it sounds good, maybe Joe's not telling us the truth, and he really just shuffles old ditto paper at him. You know, so having that top to bottom mentality. So it's refreshing to hear that progress, but also a recollection, what do we always say? Self-evaluation, there's still more to work on, which is really good. Pontiac, they told me who was going to present the Pontiac, I forgot. Here you go.
Good evening. My name is Garland Doyle. I'm the Deputy Director of the Community Development Department for the City of Pontiac. When we participated in the One Stop Ready program last year, we kind of assessed our operations and realized that we were actually already doing many of the One Stop Ready steps. However, there's a big however to that. We weren't communicating that to the public. So one of the things after our One Stop Ready training, we really addressed our communications plan, and we tackled our website. We had a lot of the things on our website already, such as our permit applications, price lists, ordinances, but they were all over the place. So we established a business and development icon on our homepage. So where we pulled all that information that was in various different spots on our website in various different departments, put it all together on our business development icon. So you can click on the icon, you can find all the information. And one of the highlights to our website is actually a video that our Mayor Deidre Waterman, was behind in creating, because I mentioned communications was our big issue that we learned, was the perception problem in Pontiac. So we wanted to make sure that developers knew we are ready and open for business So as a part of that video, which we actually showcased here, we have some developers speaking about the development process that they went through and how friendly it was.
So I still remember the story, I've shared it before, when one of the council persons, they were about to, right early on in the One Stop Ready, they had a challenging project. Remember, it was the transfer station and the recycling center that they were getting set to approve in Pontiac, and they were going to table it for a pretty extended period of time. And she kind of hollered at everybody and said, no, we're One Stop Ready, we're going to sit here and figure it out. And 3 hours later, they figured it out. And they compromised with the person, they figured it out, even on the record, and they found a way to get through that process. And so Pontiac has come a long way, and it's good that they're now bragging about it, which is part of what we always say. You do good things, you got to brag about it, right? Waterford Township. Tony, I heard that you're the one that's going to share what you're doing.
Hi, my name is Anthony Bartolotta. I'm a Waterford Township trustee, and I'm sitting in for Supervisor Wall tonight. He asked me to read a few things here, and I have a few comments afterwards. Waterford Township is committed to expediting the review, approval, and permitting process for development and redevelopment of commercial and retail projects. It has consolidated the review, approval, and permitting process for planning, engineering, and building into the one-step ready development service department. Waterford encourages free pre-application meetings to help address questions and concerns to streamline the application process. All application forms are available on our website now, as well as online payments. We are preparing to implement a new system that will allow customers to submit forms and applications electronically. The software we are purchasing for the building department is called Mobile Eyes. In addition to being set up for a building application, this software is completely interactive with the fire department operations, which will help expedite the review and approval process for commercial operations. We are also utilizing the Mobile Eyes software to expedite our code enforcement operations. Relative to the commitment to pre-application meetings, it might also be good to mention that because we have cross-trained our staff in multiple review processes, developers can usually walk in at any time and get immediate answers and concerns to further proposed developments. You guys were talking about the people at the counters. We've had problems from management since last year. I've heard from developers, contractors come in, and our people aren't customer friendly. They're very, very snarly sometimes, and you know, our supervisor's been working on them, but sometimes it's tough to change attitudes that's been going on for 20-some years. So we're trying to be more customer friendly. We're working, we got a lot more work to do, but you know, I have faith in Supervisor Wall. He's not afraid to go down and bring somebody in his office and give him a good tongue lashing if need be. So we're working, we still have a lot of work to do. There's a lot of work, especially that corner of Elizabeth Lake and Telegraph, that Summit Place. Well, my gosh, I wish we could encourage a developer to come in. Seems like we have an economic development corporation, and I haven't seen nothing they've done for us for the last 10 years. I keep wanting to disband it, but they won't disband it, so we really need to get something done with that corner down there, because it's, I have a business across the street. I've been there for 22 years. I bought the business because of the traffic flow, the mall. It was just a booming area. Now it's a ghost town. You know, my business is, I'm down 35–40%. And I really like to work with Pontiac. We put calls in and meet with the mayor and have lunch. We haven't had no response from our easterly neighbors. I know the supervisor talks to Auburn Hills, Orion Township, and White Lake, but I think we need to come together as a group. There's at least 4 different communities that we face: east, west, south, and north. We need to work together. So, you know what? My phone's open. I'm a part-time employee. So I don't know what goes on day-to-day operations with the planning development, with our building department, but I hear things, and you know, we have a lot of work to do. I think we've been stagnant for too long, and we have a fairly new board in there, I think people are afraid to voice their opinion. I have no problem voicing it, but I'm one of 7 on that board, and sometimes I get myself in trouble. I've been known to get in trouble for that, but, you know, I'm a business owner. I know what it feels like. Went up to the counter, and the person, they're doing me a favor, for Christ's sake. I'm trying to spend some money here. You know, I want to do something. You know, I get frustrated, but, you know, with the supervisor, I love working with Gary, so I wish Gary could have been here tonight. This is 11 o'clock last night, he brought this by me to do this, so I'm not prepared, and I hate facing guys. Yes, Chris.
I have a quick question. Can you confirm whether or not Supervisor Walls had a Tiger game Saturday?
You know what, he wouldn't tell me. My money would say he is, but he wouldn't tell me. I talked to him this afternoon, and I go, you're not going to One Stop Ready? He goes, no, I told you I had something to do.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll leave it at that.
What I'm close.
He probably is. Thank you.
He's a great supervisor.
So, in the whole context of Tony's remarks there, so who else feels sometimes like if I shoot my mouth off, I'm just going to get in trouble? Yes, we got a couple. I'm the king of shooting my mouth off and getting in trouble, so you know that. I know more of you feel that way at times, whether you're a planning commissioner or a council person, trustee. It is challenging sometimes. But if, in the context of what you're looking at your community, this, as I've said before, this gives you some cover. It did for Mary and Pontiac, right? Where she said, no, we're One Stop Ready. So it wasn't the council person being the stick in the mud and yelling at people. She was saying, we've decided to be part of something that is better and bigger than what we are, and so we do this. And it made a difference. So this does give you some cover. So don't be afraid, Tony, although you introduced us as Anthony. I always call you Tony. So Anthony, don't be afraid as leaders in your community to be able to say, well, listen, I dragged myself to these meetings and we're trying to do this stuff. You know what? No, I do want to make a difference now. I want this to happen. So if it's a, you know what, in a public meeting, I think we should have a stronger public relationship with Pontiac and push that, because those are the types of leadership moves that make a difference for check writers. People that want to write checks in your community like leadership. They like bold people. They like people, like Chris said, say no up front. That's good. So our last community is Wixom. So who's here from Wixom? Okay, Wixom sucks. No, I didn't say that. No. Wixom is I'll speak a little bit on behalf of Wixom. Wixom is far from here. And I say that because one of the things that they're really trying to do is to draw their resource base and their interaction with what we offer a little bit closer, which I think will help Wixom a lot. They went through some transition themselves with Tony Nowicki coming in as the city manager, and their biggest asset, the Fort Wixom plant, going through a little bit of struggle from a private sector standpoint. And so they've been attacking some of those things in the mayor as well. And so Wixom's doing a really good job. So we have a best practice that we're going to be going forward with too, that we're working on, that hopefully will help all of you. And after I get done with this, I'm going to introduce our speaker, and then you guys get on to the meat of the program. Our best practice is this. So who's called me recently on a soil erosion permit? I know, David, you have, other people have on soil erosion permits, Waterford has. Who's called me recently on an MDEQ issue? Pontiac has, although it wasn't any of you good folks, but Pontiac has called me on MDEQ issues. We have found that if we're going to preach this, and Brooks Patterson has brought in our management staff at Oakland County and department head staff at Oakland County and said, all right, Matt, tell them what you're doing so that they'll, just so you know, at the county level. And we're working now at the state level to be able to convey this message as well. I've told good folks like George Miller in the health department, so when you have issues of this restaurant can't seem to get their permit, or the septic system can't seem to get inspected, things that affect the county level, I told George, I told others, I said, listen, we're out asking our communities to be proactive, to not set timelines, to not say, okay, traditionally we get these permits done in 30 days. We're asking all of you, don't do that. Even if it takes 30 days, don't tell people it does, and don't tell your staff it does. It's the Grand Rapids model. Who remembers what I said about Grand Rapids? How they said, we no longer say how long permits take, because our staff, when we told them, yeah, we're trying to tell the public permits take 3 weeks, they did them on day 19. They didn't do them on day 2. So we just say, no, you get permits done as expedited as possible. So that mentality. So I told George, well, everybody in the county, we're asking our communities to be part of this rally cry that in Oakland County, we are immediately responsive to things. So it doesn't mean you get things done overnight, but you're responsive to it so that you don't just say, sorry, it's 4 to 6 weeks and we'll figure it out when we get there. And I said, what's going to happen now is our communities are going to start calling and saying, well, wait a minute, we're one-stop ready. Why is Water Resource telling me it's going to take 6 weeks for a soil erosion permit? So I want you to continue to do that. Don't tell anybody I said that. Because we have to fix our ship as well at the county level. So as we're asking you to be proactive and responsive and ready, we need to do the same. And trust me, it is causing some waves in the culture of Oakland County. But this is our to do. So one is, it's our best practice that we're adopting. We are going to try to become more one-stop ready. And as Joe Young said, there's lots of work to be done still, right, Joe? Yeah, as you're going through the process. And so I say that to all of you to give you the assurance that this does not mean just you. It means us as well. The last thing I'll say from our best practice is what we're going to be working on in the future. Steve Arwood, who was with Licensing and Regulatory Affairs, is now the Chief Operating Officer of the MEDC. So Steve and I have communicated, and we want to take the premises of One Stop Ready from a customer service base. They already have the redevelopment readiness, redevelopment ready cities, something where you do master planning and that kind of thing. And we've explained to them this is more customer service based. As Tony said, it's getting rid of the gnarliness at the counter type program. They want to adopt this up through into the state agencies so that they can showcase it as an example of where you have pre-apps and you need people at your pre-apps from the state, that the state will have designated liaisons through the county to all of your resources. So when you pre-identify that you're going to have a DEQ issue on your site, you're not going to have to chase it hopefully as much. It'll be all part of the system. So our to-do list going forward for the next several months is to create that system so that One Stop applies all the way up to state resources for you. So I'll cross my fingers. I'll pray a lot that we do it. So best practices. We're going to move on to our guest tonight. We always like to get professionals to come and move things forward. We're not quite there yet, but he's got a presentation. You want to get it up, right? So I've known Dick Carlisle for a long time. Back when I used to do all of the zoning work for the cellular industry, Dick was one of those jerks that would write planning letters that I would hate. And then he would write, more because I would screw up the site plan on behalf of my client. So I was the developer that complained about these planners, but I really came to admire Carlisle Workman as a firm because they historically and now don't appear to be one of those firms that play games with things. They do good, hard, solid work. If there's a review, they do it, but it's usually caused by some collaboration breakdown than it is from we found something else. And so I'm not picking on planners out there. I could pick on some planners in this region or engineers, but Carlisle Workman is certainly not one of them. His partner, Don Wortman, is planner for Orion and some other places, and so we know each other well. So Dick has agreed to pledge his time tonight to give us a presentation on best practices, some of the things he's encountered in his career, some of the things we're doing right now. I was doing a lot of work with Troy, so he may use them as some examples that we're doing. But I haven't seen his presentation, so I'm going to sit in the back and listen. So Dick, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Don, Steve, and Tom. So we send monthly reports from the building department to council. We'll just CC you guys. We do.
Thank you. Go ahead. Appreciate it. I'm just putting down a monthly report. There you go. Especially if it's in the mail. Just add us to the distribution.
So Dick, just so you know, every meeting something happens, and I remind everybody that we just won the award for the most technically advanced county in America. That's all right. I was hoping to use that, but that's no problem.
So Matt, since I'm given my time up here tonight, does this mean that Don gets one pre-application meeting that he gets paid for?
Take that up with the supervisor.
You think, huh? No.
If we didn't know they'd do it for free.
Really? Why did I agree to do this anyway? I don't know. Well, thank you very much. Fortunately, and to some degree unfortunately, about 3/4 of the people in the room here we represent. The other quarter we've done work for. So I'm pleased to do this. Some of you have heard some of this stuff before. I'm going to use some examples from communities that we do work with please don't be offended if I don't use one of my client, all of our client communities here. I'm just trying to illustrate some of the examples of some of the things that we have done. Which one is it? Yeah, okay. So we're going to talk about, as Matt said, pre-application, project tracking, permitting, internet access, and business and community input. And I'm going to hit as many high points as I can in the period of time that I've got here. Pre-application, this is really pre-application, and I think some of the things, I want to reinforce some of the things that you've heard already, but there's really 5 or 6 points that I think are really, really important. First of all, you have to be honest with yourselves. I really hear a lot of communities talk about what a great job they're doing when we start, especially with a new community, but I also found that they haven't done a good self-evaluation. In many cases, they think things are running more smoothly than they may really be. So you really have to be honest with yourself when you're starting this process. Second of all, do an internal evaluation. You're going to be amazed at what you might find out. Some of the very simplest processes. You might be your ZBA. It might be something you're planning. It might be a submittal requirement, but do an internal evaluation, do a self-evaluation, and again, some of the smallest things that you think aren't important turn out to be very important. Third, take a hard look at your zoning ordinance. I'm almost guarantee you that there can be room for improvement. I'm a consultant, so I know how zoning ordinances are written. Remember that zoning ordinances, a lot of them are written based on borrowed material, We've never done that, of course. But one of the things I tell communities when we're hired to write a zoning ordinance, I say, look, Carlisle Workman has never written a perfect ordinance. I'd like to come in here and tell you that we have, but I know for a fact that we haven't. So be honest about that and be prepared, to do a periodic evaluation of the requirements and processes that are in your ordinance. I'm going to give you a couple examples about all this stuff. And the other thing is some processes are in place just because. And this is the way we've always done it, or this is the way that one particular official who's been in charge of it thinks that this is the way it should be done. It may not even be in the ordinance, but this is the way we've always done it. To illustrate several of these points, talking about being honest with yourselves and doing an internal evaluation. One of the things that Troy did a number of years ago was really bare their soul to Zucker Systems. And Zucker came in, did an exhaustive evaluation of all the development and entitlement processes associated with the city of Troy. I think the end result was something like 102. How many?
102.
102 different recommendations that they made for the city of Troy to improve upon their entire process, dealing with everything from building to planning to code enforcement to a variety of different aspects. And it really gave the city a direction in which they needed to go, because there are a lot of areas where they were really behind in terms of their technology, the way they had done things and processes. So you shouldn't be afraid to go about an evaluation, and sometimes it does take somebody from the outside to come in and look at it with you and help you refine some of the things that you're doing. Your zoning ordinance, I said I almost guarantee you that there's something in there that can be improved. Some of the things that we've found, anybody here, you still requiring detailed engineering and construction plans essentially at a final site plan stage? One of the things that we've done is when you come in and we've written a number of zoning ordinances, we find that a lot of communities are still requiring that at a final site plan stage before a planning commission, that you have detailed construction plans. I mean, plans that can basically be built from the next day. And so therefore planning commissioners are looking voluminous details on that engineering detail, none of which either, they certainly don't understand. Frankly, as a planner, I reviewed plans for years that I don't understand. So it's things like that you really need to evaluate. Is this really necessary? Are we really requiring the information that we need? Because there's always, as you'll see, there's always a series of follow-up steps that come after what a planning commission or a township board or a city council approve. So, when I say to really take a good, solid evaluation, this is, there's always opportunities to do that. And sometimes even the smallest tweaks can make the biggest difference. So one of the things in the pre-application is always that initial contact. I've said the old saying that you never get a second chance to make a first impression, and how that initial contact is made is very important. You really need. I don't want to embarrass Dave because this person worked in the building department long before Dave was around, but there used to be a building inspector in Independence Township. For some reason was allowed to answer the phone because he'd always, he'd answer the phone, building department, and I hear him, he goes, well, you're talking to the wrong person, and I said, well, that's for sure, And unfortunately, though, when I get around, and we represent a lot of communities, I see a lot of that, and I hear a lot of that. And I also see a situation where there's no really anybody in charge answering questions. And so consequently, what happens is you really have an inconsistent, and from the very first contact, that's where it really gets off track. And I find as a consultant many times, because that applicant has been misinformed from the beginning, I'm swimming upstream the entire way in terms of trying to get that application straightened out. I have to say, sometimes that happens with elected officials too. When that applicant goes and sees that elected official before seeing an administrative official, they often get a misimpression about what's going to be required. So don't mislead somebody at the beginning by giving them misinformation or not providing them with the proper idea in terms of what the approach must be for the project. Because all you're doing is doing a tremendous disservice, not only to your community, but really to them. As Matt said, one of the things that we really believe in is laying it right out on the table from the very beginning, because most people want to know, where do I stand and how do I get my approval? That's really all they want to know. And so consequently, the way that you can help them the most is by being honest and straightforward with them. So having a designated contact, either if you have a planning director, your zoning administrator, or your building official, but you need to have one person who is a point person for a development contact. That will ensure consistent information, and it also provides that applicant with a name and a face associated with your community. Now, before you do that, make sure that person has some training. Make sure you carefully select who that person is, that they're comfortable in that role, and that they have the proper training to be able to do that. Also, make sure that they have enough background to defer questions to maybe a consultant or to another expert, without answering questions that they don't know the real answer to. So, it's important that person knows what their role is and also knows what their role is not. When an applicant is making initial contact, I think you need to step in their shoes also. Why are they there? First of all, especially when they're making this initial contact. Well, first of all, they want to describe to you what their idea is. This is something they're excited about. They want to convey to you what their concept is for what it is that they want to do. They also want to have their questions answered based on the information they give to you. So first of all, make sure you give them a chance to tell you what they want to do. Second of all, it's your obligation to answer their questions and answer them correctly. And if you don't know the answer to the question, make sure you get the correct information and get back to them. The applicant also wants to make sure that they fully understand, have the proper applications, and know what the fees are. Again, that's the appropriate time to have that kind of discussion. But again, making sure that they get into the right direction at this initial point in time is extremely important. And the other thing that they may want to do with you is discuss key ordinance requirements. So again, when you have multiple points of contact, that's when things really get screwed up. And I see it very frequently. So having an initial point of contact, having that person know what their boundaries are in terms of what questions they should be answering and what they need to get further information on is extremely important. Because again, if you don't do that, that's where projects get off track from the very beginning. So when Matt talks about the pre-application meeting, we've actually been doing pre-application meetings in Independence for many years, as well as many other communities. But we thought in the very beginning that it was very important to get everybody around the table to be talking about this. The reason I felt it was important was not only for the benefit of the applicant, but for the benefit of all of us that worked within the township to know what each other is saying, So these meetings should really include whoever the development coordinator is, your planner, your engineer, your building official, if that's somebody other than the coordinator. You need to have your utilities people there, and in many cases we include police and almost always fire. One of the things that I have found in many cases is that the disagreements that may occur between these various functions is basically because of a lack of communication. And a lack of communication about what proper code should be applied, as well as how they should be applied within the context of the objectives of the community. So consequently, it's very important to have all these folks around the table for that purpose. And second of all, I've been continually amazed at some of the information that I hear coming out of police departments and fire departments about things as a planner I didn't even think about. So, you know, I look at that as a real learning experience for me and also for the applicant to have everybody around the table to discuss this project. Sometimes it's even beneficial to have those meetings without the applicant present in the beginning so that you can all get on the same page about what it is that you need to do. There's also a benefit of that. One thing I don't like to see happen is the community sort of airing their dirty linen when an applicant's right there, so that there's disagreements and they all of a sudden, I mean, if you want to convey the message that we're a dysfunctional community, you know, that's a real good way to start when you have, you know, DPW arguing with the building department, or building arguing with fire department, or the engineer and planner, you know, not getting along very well. So sometimes when you know there are sensitive or tricky issues that you need to work through, sometimes it's a good idea to have that meeting initially without the applicant, so that you fully understand where you're all coming from. So I strongly recommend that in some cases, especially when there's more complicated projects. Typically what happens here is that the applicant will present their project, and it's an opportunity for discussion in a more informal setting, you know, not in front of a board, so that, you know, there is, you know, a feeling of intimidation. You can more informally discuss the concepts and very, you know, in a very open and honest manner, sort of identify what some of the weakened points and some of the strong points are. But some of the things that should come out of that meeting also is a project approval schedule, and that ordinance requirements should be clearly understood by the applicant by the time they leave that meeting. So if there's any misunderstanding on their part, this is a great opportunity to clear those things up. And finally, the applicant should also have a clear understanding of what the mutual responsibilities are. And what I mean by that is, okay, if we submit our plan by then, we will be on, you know, what will happen from there. And I think that's the point in time where you really need to discuss that. It's also an important time to emphasize to them and their consultants that, you know, you need to submit complete plans. Okay. One of the things I see delay projects more than anything are incomplete submissions. And I rarely blame this on the applicant, because they've hired a professional, and if they haven't fully vetted who they've hired, and that firm or that individual is not as familiar with the ordinance requirements as they should be, usually what I find is that first submission is going to be deficient. So consequently, it's very important at that point in time to emphasize the fact that you need to, you know, the more complete your submission is, the faster the process is going to go. That's pretty simple, but, you know, what I'm finding as the economy improves, we're starting to see some bad patterns, you know, kind of creep in here. Sloppy work, incomplete submissions, and so it always is helpful to sort of pull everybody back and say, look, make sure that you have this, this, and this. If you have any questions, we're here to answer your questions. But please know that if you submit an incomplete submission, you're going to delay the process here, and that's not what we want to do. So you're really doing them a favor, you're doing the applicant a favor by putting them and their consultant on notice that, look, you've got to make sure you understand the ordinance requirements, and if for some reason you don't, please ask the question. One of the things that we have found helpful is using a procedure guide or manual as a useful tool to discuss, to lay out what the processes are. This can be a physical document, or it can be something that you can also put online, and this is something that we've prepared for Independence Township. Really what this document, where do I minimize this? I knew I was going to move you up here. Yeah, pull up the, yeah. There you go. There you go. Okay, so something that we prepared for Independence was a procedure manual. Where's the scroll thing? See, I'm obviously not the person to be talking about integrating technology into your processes, right? There you go. Just bring me down to like the first. Yeah, just anything. Yeah. Yeah, for example, what we do is we start out in the beginning of this procedure manual and just identify who is involved in what process. And then throughout each one of these things has a chapter, such as rezoning, that gives what the requirements are, a flow chart, what the information requirements are, so that there's a very clear understanding of what the process is. You have a procedure manual like this, no one can say that they weren't informed or they didn't know about what the procedures are. The other reason that this is helpful, it's helpful internally also as a document, so that you have a document that flowcharts the process, so the Planning Commission's fully informed. Because let's face it, you know, we get new commissioners on board, we get new Board of Appeals members, we get new elected officials, so having a document like this is extremely helpful. Okay, thanks, Ryan. There you go. So the procedure manual is a useful tool. I strongly recommend you do that. It's a useful exercise to go through because oftentimes when you put this together, that's when you begin to see some weak spots in your processes also. So it's a helpful self-evaluation tool. Okay, project tracking. So everything goes well. You get the process through. You get a complete part here, but you get your approvals done through the Planning Commission, and you're in the midst of that process, maybe an initial submission. But a lot of times things fall down through the cracks because there's no consistent means of tracking where a project is in the entire process. So again, this is why it's very important to have that point person. When you have multiple people involved, then no one's going to be paying attention to where a project is in any given time in the process. So when that submission is made, it's important the development coordinator really can review that to the extent that they can for completeness. And a lot of times a checklist, a simple checklist is a great tool to have in place because the development coordinator can inform the applicant of any deficiencies in their submittal. That will keep the process from being slowed down. So consequently, you would have a coordinator do an initial review of that, maybe even before even sending to consultants and your engineer, for example. And there may, instead of it being delayed after reviews, there's going to be some initial identification of missing information right at that point. There's another tool that we have been involved in that we've used, and that is actually having regular meetings of that same group that you have pre-application meetings with. We work for Pittsfield Township, and we have what we call an administrative review committee. That administrative review committee meets weekly. Now, that's a very active community, and some of you would need that, and some of you don't. But you can combine these. These can also be your pre-application committee. They can also be your project tracking committee also, with your development coordinator. And we found this to be very useful in Pittsfield Township because it's a very active community. So for example, this is a typical agenda that we have in Pittsfield Township of our Administrative Review Committee. We meet every Wednesday at 10 o'clock, and the development coordinator puts together an agenda. We talk about any site plan and conditional use permit reviews, and it goes on from there. But if you notice, let's just look at the first one. This is a project called Versa Pittsfield Phase 2. So she documents when their plan was resubmitted. This is an ongoing process. Engineering review comments issued to applicant. So she documents when the engineer issued the review comments. You notice that the planner hasn't issued the review comments because we haven't done our review yet. But anyway, so if you look all the way down here, let's look down here at like Arbor Ridge Phase 3. Well, look at all that's going on here. We've got a Water Resources Commission, the Washington County Water Resource Commission's comments were received on August 5th. Wetland review comments were issued to the applicant on August 8th. Engineering review comments issued to the applicant on August 20th. And comments received from the Road Commission on August 26th. So this committee is tracking these projects. The development coordinator is tracking what's going on here. We know when the plans went out for review. We know when the comments have come back. If you notice, the comments were issued to the applicant. So we know that the applicant has received those comments. So we find this to be a very useful process. That's one other thing I want to show you about this. Not only are we reviewing projects that are in the pipeline, we're also reviewing projects that are pending submittal requirements. In other words, they're somewhere in the process and we're waiting on something to be done. Like for example, this very first project, Fieldstone Park, we're waiting for the traffic study to be completed. And then we have other Planning Commission agenda items are also outlined in below here. It's just I found it to be a very helpful process. So maybe in your community, it maybe doesn't need to be every week, but maybe every other week, you keep that development or that pre-application committee meeting group together, but you use it as a project tracking device. But you need to have some kind of formal system. I won't get into all the details of BSNA, but you know they have project tracking module in there. My guess is some of you are using BSNA to its full extent. My guess is that many of you are not. It has tremendous capability for all types of the permitting and land development activity, as well as code enforcement for that matter. And so consequently, I'd get with your BSNA representative and see how you might be able to be using that to a greater extent.
Hey Dick, you know they just created a planning documentation format. It's just released.
That's great. Did everybody hear that? BSNA has just completed a planning module so that you can track planning projects through the process also.
If you have BSNA, it's a very nominal cost.
Great, great to hear. So you know, if you are looking for, you know, I know some of the things with BSNA, you know, it's a big investment for you, but in the long run, it will pay, you know, it'll pay dividends for you in terms of keeping things on track. But you can also do something that's just, you know, in a community that's a little less active, just do something as simple as using an Excel spreadsheet. You know, we keep this in place. You know, it's got the, you know, the file number. It's got what the date received, the applicant, the property ID number, the location, and basically where it is in the process. And again, at a minimum, this is what your development coordinator should be doing. It's helpful for the Planning Commission to be able to know that, you know, here's what we've got coming up, you know, down the road, or your township board or your city council. So, like I said, at a minimum, even if you're not going to use the full extent of BSNA, at least, you know, doing a simple Excel tracking sheet is very helpful. So permitting, you know, after site planning approval, permitting process begins. And I think one of the things we sometimes have a tendency to forget that, you know, when we're in the post-planning approval stage, I mean, in some cases, that's just the beginning of a project. You have, there are permits that have to be obtained from the state, from the county, for various site improvements. There's soil erosion, there's water and sewer permits that need to be obtained, you know, not only locally, but even from the state to some extent, road access. So prior to allowing construction to proceed, again, having a pre-con meeting is also essential. So we talked about the pre-app. This is sort of the post-app, which is a pre-construction meeting. So what's the purpose of it? Well, similar to the pre-app meeting, the pre-con meeting ensures that the construction process will operate smoothly and that all the necessary permits are obtained. You know, it's one thing for a project to get delayed when it's in the approval process. It's a whole other thing for a project to be stopped when the bulldozers are out on the site and the contractor's bill is, you know, is running. So consequently, you know, having a smooth pre-construction process is as equally important, in my opinion, as having a smooth pre-app process. And again, this is another way that the community can ensure that the hiccups are kept to a minimum with any kind of construction process in your community. Again, as with the pre-app, there should always be a consistent point person. That could be the development coordinator, could actually be someone in your community that deals more in the construction arena from that standpoint, like your building official, for example. And again, who should be there? Well, definitely the owner of the project, their contractor and their engineer, the building official, your engineer, your community engineer, and then your DPW and or sewer and water director. I think Matt's idea is great, is if we can get, well, and the architect, I should say that too. Yeah, architect also. Sorry, Dave. Dave Boersman's an architect and planning commissioner. It would be great to begin to get our other outside agencies to participate in these meetings, if not at the table, even remotely. I mean, you know, with technology today, it's not that difficult to pull somebody into a meeting. So if that's something that, Ryan, I think that we can facilitate through this process and help everybody get the technology there, which is there, to do that, I think it's going to keep, it's going to make things run a lot more smoothly. The building permitting and inspection process, again, something in all your cases, I think, is you all do within your own communities. It's important to instill a customer service philosophy, provide online access to permit applications in a readable PDF, establish a clear turnaround time for plan review, 5 days for residential, 10 days for more complicated commercial projects. I think in Ann Arbor, they're out 3 weeks, maybe 6 weeks in terms of plan review. You know, I can't imagine that a building department can get away with that, but it's, you know, again, this is where time is really money, and there's no reason why a building plan review should take 3 or 4 or 5 weeks unless it's a super complicated project. You should establish some kind of inspection policy. If you have a smaller building department, maybe 24 hours is unrealistic, but if you have a more active building department, no reason why inspections can't be out in 24 hours. Equipping your inspectors with field tablets. This is something that I think many of you are doing. I think you've done it, Dave. I know, for example, absolutely Troy has certainly done that. We do it with in some of the departments that we run. Essentially, the tablet's all preloaded in the morning with the inspections for the inspector. All that inspector does is pick up the tablet. They're out in the field with all the inspections that they need to know. They record the information from the inspection. That tablet goes back in the dock, and it's recorded and synced with BSNA. What a seamless way to do this. And it's so much more efficient than inspectors, you know, writing the information down and then handing them to somebody in the office, a clerical person, and saying, would you please record this on BS? I mean, think about how much can get translated improperly when that kind of process is done. And again, you know, this technology is not hard to use, and it's not tremendously expensive anymore. And in the long run, it's going to pay dividends for you as a community by having a more efficient inspection process. If you're still doing roofing permits, things like that, I mean, having an over-counter permit process is a very consumer-friendly thing to be able to do. And if you think about most of the things that you issue over-the-counter permits are for homeowners that are trying to do their own work, helping them with handouts, for example, to say, here's what this is what a deck design that meets code looks like, is very helpful. So it's having as many helpful cheat sheets as you can in your department from the permitting process is going to, again, be a real service. And again, in most cases, to the homeowner who's either using a contractor or doing their own work. Internet access. Well, one of the things I'd like you all to do is go back and look at your websites. Just go look at your websites and act as, you know, you're a citizen trying to find information. Some of you have excellent websites that are very good. Some of you have websites that you probably think are good, and some of you have websites that are terrible. Generally, I would say they range. My observation is there's two extremes. There's ones that have too much stuff on them, and there's ones that don't have enough stuff on them. So begin to evaluate what the really important things are that somebody who's doing business in your community wants to know. And how do they find that on your website? If you can't readily access that yourself, think about somebody coming from the outside that wants to make an investment in your community. You know, that would be the first thing that would frustrate me if that were me. So, you know, take a look at your website. Do you have a designated responsible party? Do you have one person responsible? Even if it's a consultant, you know, they're relying upon information that you give them to put in there. Is it up to date? A lot of cases it's not. How often is it updated? Yeah. Is it user-friendly and intuitive? You know, I'm not very computer savvy, as you can see. But, you know, so I need a website to go, when I go on a website, it's got to be really intuitive for somebody like me. Maybe for some of the rest of you, you don't need that. But I will say, I think the average person needs to be able to access in a very intuitive way. Does it contain all the needed forms and permit applications someone would need? Again, that is not that difficult a thing to do, and easily put on your website. And can agendas and minutes be accessed? So, you know, can we go back and can we find agendas of things that happened a year ago, 2 years ago, 5 years ago, 6 years ago? Or can we also find what's on the next agenda? Very important. I already talked about writable PDFs. I think because of the time, Ryan, I'm not going to pull that slide up, okay? Finally, business and community input. We probably don't give this enough attention, and I probably haven't given it enough attention in my presentation, but I do think it calls for a real conscious effort. First of all, periodic meetings with business, developer, and builder groups. One of the things that we've done in Troy, and we followed it up in Independence Township, was have sponsored real estate forums. And in Troy, we sponsored a real estate forum in which we had 65 of individuals attend that who had all some aspect of expertise in the real estate that forms the city of Troy. It was engineers, architects, I won't forget architects this time. It was developers, it was realtors, it was commercial bankers. It was really a variety of resources. And what came out of that meeting was so informative. And after the meeting was over, I turned to the mayor and I said, I think we just delivered about $200,000 worth of free market consulting advice to you. Because we sat there and we talked to the people who are the ones who are investing their money, telling us what they thought we needed to be doing. And it's such a simple thing to do. You know, how do you get information? You ask people you ask people the right questions, you know. We did the same thing in Independence Township where we focused it on Dixie Highway. I think the gentleman from Waterford would, you know, probably understand why. We brought together 25 individuals trying to tell us how are we going to get an aging commercial corridor, one in which we've lost 40% of its taxable value in the last 10 years. How do we get that back to where it used to be, it should be? And again, it's very easy to get this kind of information and to find and to get very useful information. I swear, after I left the Troy forum, not only did I feel like I got a lot of information from a real nuts and bolts standpoint, I got some very high-level creative information from that group. Very high level, you know. They were as good a planners as I've ever met from the standpoint of what they thought we needed to do. It was the same thing with the group in Independence Township. We got some very creative thinking. So you don't always just get the, in fact, none of whatever I heard was just get rid of all the regulations and that'll solve the trick. None of it was like that. But it was very useful in terms of how the kinds of things we needed to do to promote investment in our community. So it's a very simple thing to organize, and I strongly suggest that whatever your issue is or whatever you're trying to find out, go out and ask the people that have to, that have to negotiate through these processes. Not only in your community, but in other places, because a lot of times they can come to you and say, well, we just did something in Royal Oak, or we just did something in Ferndale, or we just did something in Waterford, and here's how they dealt with that. Have you thought about dealing with it that way? And I think you'll find very useful information. Form closer relations, has already been said, with the Chamber and other business groups. That's one of the things we're doing. We do in Troy, we're doing in Independence, we've done in other places, is really work closely with the director and some of the various committees in the Chamber to really provide us with good direction. We have, and also to provide online access to community comments. And I won't, again, because of the time tonight, I won't pull up this site, but we've been using a site called My Community Remarks that is very customizable. We use it for planning projects, we've used it for transportation projects, but you can also use it for public service, comments on public services, because it's a real-time tool where people, out in your community, with smartphones, can download, can post comments, they can upload photos right on the site. So for example, if you've got broken sidewalks and you've got an issue in your community about that, your eyes and ears of the community are going to show you what they're seeing out there through the My Community Remarks website tool. So I always I open with something about giving you something to think about, and I'd like to close with something to give you. I like to do this thing of terms of the first 5 fixes, and we do this with our MML training on economic development, and I thought this would be a good thing to do with you tonight. So the first 5 fixes that I recommend to you, if you haven't done it already, is identify the first point of contact in your community. Like I said, you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And you might not have the right first point of contact in your community. Not everybody can be, the ambassador of your community, and maybe they're not in the right job. But doesn't mean there's not a right job there for them. But maybe being the point person is not the right place that they should be. Make sure your development process is clean and consistent. Flowcharts and guidebooks are helpful. Look for barriers in your ordinance. Simple amendments can mean a great deal. For example, if you don't have some form of administrative approval for certain minor site plan amendments, you're really doing a big disservice to people in your community as well as your planning commission by sending relatively minor things to the planning commission and clouding up the agenda of people that are otherwise pretty busy with some things in your community that are very important. So take some simple steps such as administrative site plan review. Have a minor amendment process built into your site plan section so that minor amendments can be made very simply. Get your staff on the same page. Customer service training is readily available through a whole variety of organizations, and it's helpful. It'll be very helpful in the long run if everybody is singing from the same hymnal in that particular case. Review your website. Does it contain useful information for potential community investors? So I've identified the first 5 fixes, and I say here the second 5 are all up to you. So thank you very much. Have any of you dealt with Dan Hunter, by the way? What a great guy.
Thank you, Dick. Not bad for an Ohio State guy, but he's been here long enough, so that's way, way, way in the distance. Matt and I are tag teaming. If you didn't notice, Matt, he's definitely under the weather. I can't believe he was able to kind of make it through. He was up in Lansing today, so maybe that's why he's under the weather. We've got time for questions for Dick. There's some great, the first 5 fixes, and then some more. I learned a lot. Every time I hear and hear communities, I'm learning stuff. So are there any questions for Mr. Carlisle? Leave the Ohio State out of it. Brett?
What community uses the tablets in the field with the inspector? Who is it that you work with?
Troy does,
Okay.
Independence does, we
Get to install them, we run about, I don't know.
We run smaller building departments, not larger ones. Like for example, Riverview, we have all of our inspectors there equipped with tablets now. It's a very easy, great thing to do. The other thing too is one of the things that Troy does is all of their inspectors are equipped with cell phones. And you know, as someone who's waiting for an inspection has that cell phone number and they're able to contact the office and find out where that person is in their inspections that day, so they're not waiting around all day. That's pretty much how that works, isn't it, Mark?
They can call the inspector directly.
Yeah, it's called the inspector directly.
It wasn't that long ago, they didn't even give the number out.
Hey, would you think we could get Comcast to do this?
I'll tell you, there was a point that early on that struck home with me. Dick was talking about, and I think Stephanie from Auburn Hills just left, that radical hospitality. I grew up in a small family business in Philadelphia, and there was an expansion that my grandfather and father were working on. And they were so afraid to go and ask. And it was all business. I mean, they were growing their business. We did a video here, Dave Schreiber probably remembers, it was a business development video 15, 20 years ago. And so we went out to get some testimonials of businesses that had expanded. And there was one fellow who spoke very, very pointedly that he was trained as a business executive not to trust the community, he just was not comfortable of going. So the importance of the person at that desk or on the phone, they're business people. They don't know anything about these processes that we have, that entitlement process that Matt had in the review. So to reach out and be that friendly, helpful is so important. I couldn't believe it when this person who we put in the video, of course he came around and he said, now with Oakland County, I found that not to be true, that the staff is terrific. We ended up doing business financing and helping with some permitting at the state level. But this was a small business, 30, 40 employees, actually not that small to me, but they had been trained to hold things back. So that was really important to me. That liaison that we've talked about as one of the best practices, that point of contact and that liaison, yep, it's great. BS&A's got a new tool, but still needs to be someone looking at that and tracking it through. So it's automated, but there still is that responsibility to, we need this information. Shall I just wait for the next planning commission meeting? And they're going to bring it or not, or they're going to meet the deadline? No, it's being that proactive. That's very important. Questions? Yes, got one back here.
That development coordinator, that's very interesting. Is that sort of like an ombudsman for the planning commission?
The development coordinator, is it an ombudsman for the planning commission?
I wouldn't characterize it as that. I mean, you know, their job is to act on behalf of the community in terms of ensuring that the processes and ordinances, but I mean, they can certainly do that in a manner that is helpful to the applicant. So it's, you know, typically what we see, it's either the planner, it's the zoning administrator, it's the building official, or usually the three people that we see typically who are the point person. The point that I was trying to make is don't have that role spread over, you know, a half a dozen people, or don't have that role not identified at all. You should have a person, whether it's your zoning administrator, your planner, or your your building official, have that person be the person responsible for being the coordinator of development projects when they come into your community.
Now, we do not have BSNA, we have Adam.
Yeah.
So what would you recommend? Just to ask Adam if they have say type of a program? Or?
Sure. Sure. I don't know. I'm not familiar with that. I mean, I'm no longer familiar with that, but certainly. But you know, again, it doesn't have to be complicated to be effective. I mean, for example, as I said, with simply development tracking, I mean, you can do that just with a simple Excel spreadsheet process. You know, it's just a matter of making sure someone does it diligently, and they track the projects, they keep the dates in there, they provide the reports to your commissions and boards, so that everybody knows where something is in the process. So it doesn't necessarily have to be that. I recommend that you try to integrate all this data together with your assessing, and your building, and your code enforcement, and all of that. BSNA is particularly effective at that. I don't know about that, but I would ask your rep. Yeah. Yeah, this is Ron Ritchie, and we'd be happy to provide you with an example of what they use. Okay? Yeah.
When you were talking about the counties and state regulatory agencies, you made a comment about participate. Are you talking about participate here or participate remotely at pre-app meetings?
I think in the pre-app and in the pre-con meetings, in both cases, where there's state permits involved, no reason why that can't be the case, really. Right, correct.
You stress having an initial contact with companies that do not have multiple points of contact. I noted that it should be a two-way street. That's often our problem, is that the builders, the owners, the developers, the architects, and the actual people doing the work don't seem to talk to each other either. Is it practical to try to force them into meeting?
Yeah, I think you've made it excellent. Everybody hear that point, is that sometimes what we're advocating here on behalf of the community isn't practiced on behalf of the applicant, and you're very right. So I think the pre-development meeting is a good opportunity to emphasize that point. Say, all right, who is your point of contact on this project? And we will funnel everything through that point of contact, you know, so that you get all the information, and I think that's a fair thing to ask. I totally agree with you in terms of what happens. Even as consultants, we get bombarded with questions from the architect, from the owner, from their engineer, from somebody else, you know, and it makes it, and you often wonder, are they talking to one another? Well, when you see their plans submitted, you realize, no, they're not. So I think that's a very important point to be able to emphasize in your pre-development meeting. It's a good point.
Now, when it comes to the flow charts and the procedure manuals, as far as a starting point goes, good idea or bad idea, maybe go to some of the neighboring communities that already have them in place. And if you think it might be a good idea, could you recommend one?
Here, I'll give you this. Dave, is that online now?
Yes.
We put that online in Independence Township. So, like I told you, you know, I mean, there isn't any new work out there. It's all, you know. But no, I do suggest that, and I suggest you start with probably the most active process you have. Let's say site plan review or rezoning or something like that. But yeah, you should start with that. You know, are you what community is this?
White Lake.
White Lake, okay. I mean, you know, there's other, you know, publications, you know, through MTA and such that also provide that. Now, they won't be customized to your ordinance, though. But, you know, that's a start.
Dick? Just to piggyback on that, when you do the procedural manual, when you start to write up the flow chart and think about the way you do business, it gives you a chance to kind of self-evaluate, which is very helpful.
Yep. That's exactly right. It does give you a chance to say, oh, wow, this is a little bit more cumbersome than I really thought it was. So, yes?
A couple of our speakers have emphasized the importance of the website and ease of navigation. Outside of the communities in this room, is there a particular community that you can say has an outstanding
Yeah, I think one of the communities that I mentioned is Pittsfield Township in Washtenaw County. I think their website is good. Well, nicely designed. It's attractive, but it's also easy to use. In this room, I have to say that Troy just got their website redesigned, didn't you? And I hadn't been on it until I was getting ready for this presentation. The new one, and I found it to be, really one of the best that I've seen and used. So there are a lot of others, though, I can tell you, not in this room, but outside this room, that are a literal nightmare. They shouldn't even have a website if they're that bad. No. You're coming along okay. But the thing about it, it's something that is, yeah, I realize there's an investment there, but it's not a huge investment to have a decent website. There's a lot of creative website developers out there that can put something together for you that's probably a lot more useful maybe than some of the others that you've seen.
I was just going to say, I'm from White Lake, and I called up our supervisor, on the one-stop ready program that we've been going to. Has he implemented anything? And I'll let him talk a little bit about different developers that he has called into his office.
Ever since we started the process with One Stop Ready, I've always gone back to the office and actually done homework. One of the first things that I did is I looked at our website. And you were absolutely right. It wasn't easy for developers, let's say in China, to take a look at White Lake. So sitting down with my planner and my in-house IT person, we change it around so on the left-hand side we've got quick access button or shortcut buttons that actually take you right into our clear zoning program, our ordinances, all that great information, our demographics, that kind of stuff. Last time we were together, one of the homework assignments that I took back was to sit down with some of our developers and actually face-to-face put it on the table. What's our roadblocks that you currently see as a developer? How can we streamline our process? And we got a lot of good information from those developers that we sat down with. So it's communication. Communication's a great tool. We just need to take and use it.
Yeah, you raise a great point. You have to be not afraid to hear things you don't want to hear.
Exactly. Put it out on the table.
Put it out there, exactly. By the same token, you also should not be afraid to be able to lay it on the line to an applicant if it's what they're asking for is not going to work in your community or work on that site, for example. Because they want to hear that in most cases. 99 and 9/10% of the developers want to know right up front, do I got a shot here, Well, yes, you do. Here's what you need to do to get it. Or, what you're proposing isn't going to fit. You can't put a 100,000 square foot building on a half-acre lot. You just, what I'm saying is that it's easy. You're doing a service by being straightforward and honest.
I just wanted to echo the business input. We've heard a couple communities talk about wrapping the chambers in. In the chambers, there's 25 of them in Oakland County, and they're all different sizes and shapes. But there's one thing, yeah, they're membership driven, but they care deeply about the community, and they hear from businesses every day. So to tie them in some meaningful way is really important. Mr. Bellata had talked about Waterford, that the Waterford Chamber is involved with some of their pre-app and site plan meetings. They can then be an ambassador in working with other businesses. I had the good pleasure to attend one of these sessions that Mr. Carlisle was talking about. That's the one in Troy, and reaching out to the real estate community. And Dick, you're right. It was a treasure trove of information, free. Just for the asking. Unfortunately, I couldn't do the one in Independence. Hated to miss that. But asking the developers, real estate brokers, other regional partners, what their thoughts are about, you got to get that business input. I mean, the liaison will pick up a lot of that. You all pick up a lot of that. wearing multiple hats. But to formalize that, to look at the chambers, to perhaps set up other types of ways to get that input. I know up in Orion, something Matt Gibb had started was a once a month breakfast, just come, get a cup of coffee, and talk about business issues. I think Chris Barnett has continued with that. That's essentially what Brooks Patterson has done now for 20 years with his business roundtable. About 150 business executives providing input through 4 different committees, if we can get them into 4 different committees, but providing that input on ways that Oakland County can improve. We'd be lost without that. The ideas that come up, we couldn't think of because we're not in that space. The businesses are. So if you're not reaching out to them, figure out a way to do that. It's critically important. Any other questions? I want to thank the first-year communities, if there's still any here, that presented. There's some great, really some great stuff. You can see they're working really hard. Pontiac, go to their website and check out the video with the mayor. She unveiled that at our property showcase here a couple of months ago. The things that Tony and Waterford are working on. I can't be prouder of the communities, and it's a work in process, and we're never done. And as Matt Gibb was saying, we certainly are working on some things here at the county. We've had several meetings with the Water Resource Commissioner. Matt's talked about the health department. We have to walk the walk. Our next session is October 29th. Same time, same place. Tigers will be in the World Series. Hey, you know, I got a text. It's too bad he's not here. I can't rib him. But I got a text from somebody saying they saw Chris Barnett at the Tiger game today.
That's every day, every game.
It was Gary Wall. So thank you all for coming. We'll see you in October. Have a good night.
Good night, everybody.